So think about this for a second. How does the exact same software ecosystem that the U.S. military uses to identify lethal battlefield targets in real time,
Right.
how does that exact same tech also optimize the global supply chain for a company like Beyond Meat or, Ferrari?
It's a pretty wild paradox, honestly.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to essentially unpack this controversial, highly lucrative, and just frankly deeply complex software giant sitting right at the center of that paradox, which is Palantir.
Yeah, and we have a really massive stack of sources for you today. We're looking at U.S. military contract data, UK National Health Service parliamentary documents, and a bunch of Palantir's own commercial specs.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because the through line connecting all those seemingly unrelated sources is, well, it's a fundamental shift in how massive organizations process reality.
Yeah, I mean, for the past 2 decades, Palantir hasn't just been selling individual apps. They've effectively been building foundational operating systems for data.
Right, going from analog to digital.
Exactly. Taking massive, siloed, just chaotic information networks and transforming them into a single pane of glass for, really high-stakes decision-making.
Which is wild. And to really grasp how they achieve that level of corporate dominance, we have to start where they cut their teeth, right?
Yeah.
The tactical edge of national security.
Yeah, the battlefield.
Right. So to understand the military's information overload problem, I want you to imagine something. Imagine having to look at 9 different apps on your phone just to order food.
Sounds exhausting.
Right. Constantly cross-referencing menus and maps. Now imagine doing that under literal enemy fire.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Before these unified solutions, military decision makers were essentially performing what they call swivel chair integration.
Swivel chair integration.
Yeah, like analysts having to monitor 8 or 9 entirely separate systems just to build a combat picture. You pull satellite data from one terminal, physically turn your chair to cross-reference drone footage on another monitor, and then check signals intelligence on a third. And the process of moving detections between those platforms, to build a targeting case, it was entirely manual.
So they're just like copying and pasting coordinates while the clock is ticking down.
Literally. It was slow, error-prone, and the sheer volume of modern battlefield data had actually become a severe liability.
Which brings us to Palantir's core defense platforms. We're talking about Gotham, their intelligence operating system, and the Maven smart system, or MSS.
Right, Maven.
Yeah, and Maven is designed specifically to collapse all those fragmented systems into one interface. It does this continuous sensor fusion.
Right, pulling in satellite imagery, drone feeds, all of it.
Exactly. And the results in these defense reviews are just staggering. Like the Pentagon's chief digital and AI officer, Cameron Stanley, he demonstrated Maven back in March 2026.
Oh, I remember that quote.
Yeah, he said, and I quote, left click, left click, magically it becomes a detection. This is revolutionary.
And he's not exaggerating. I mean, we're looking at a system that compresses the traditional kill chain from hours or days down to just minutes.
Just minutes. That's insane.
Yeah. The sources note that MEN currently processes roughly 1,000 targeting recommendations per hour.
1,000 an hour.
Yeah, and it supports over 20,000 active users across all major U.S. combat commands. So this isn't like a pilot program, it's the standard.
And if you look at the broader picture, the strategic context, this software is really the engine behind CJDC2.
Right, the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control.
Exactly. It's a mouthful, but it's the Pentagon's massive initiative to connect every sensor to every shooter. Air, land, sea, space, cyber, all of it.
And they're putting serious money behind it. The military expanded its AI investment from $480 million to $13.4 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pursuing an AI-first warfighting force. But let's test the logic here for a second. Processing 1,000 targets an hour raises a pretty critical question.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because 1,000 recommendations an hour sounds, frankly, terrifying if you assume the system is autonomous.
Right.
Like if the AI is making detections in minutes, is the AI essentially pulling the trigger here? Or is it just teeing up the shot for the human?
So based on the platform specifications we looked at, it is strictly deployed as a decision support tool. It is not an autonomous weapons system.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
Gary, the AI handles the exhausting, high-volume data fusion, right? Finding the needle in a haystack of satellite imagery. But It only presents a strike recommendation to a human operator.
So there's a human in the loop.
Always. The software includes immutable audit trails and hard-coded human approval controls. It's meant to accelerate understanding, not replace human judgment.
Right. But, having this incredibly powerful data fusion engine in a cloud server, that doesn't actually solve the physical constraints of warfare.
No, it doesn't.
Because a pristine software dashboard is totally useless if you can't get it to a soldier standing in a remote desert with no Wi-Fi, or like in an active electronic warfare environment where everything is jammed.
Right, what the military calls the tactical edge.
Exactly. So how does Palantir bridge the gap between the cloud and the literal mud?
Well, our sources highlight a major hardware-software convergence happening right now, and that's the Army's Titan program.
Yes, Titan. Tactical Intelligence Targeting Access Node. The U.S. Army awarded Palantir a $178.4 million contract for 10 prototype Titan systems.
And the total contract value is up to $250 million, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Palantir actually delivered the first 2 next-gen AI-defined ground stations on time and on budget.
Which is rare in defense contracting.
Truly. But the strategic value of Titan goes back to that information overload problem. Brig, Jen Ed Barker, explicitly noted that flooding soldiers with too much raw data does not benefit the mission.
Right, so Titan solves this with deep sensing and edge computing. The hardware processes the intelligence locally at the ground station using AI, filtering out the noise.
So they only transmit the most critical, actionable targeting data to the soldiers on the ground.
Exactly. But keeping the software on those mobile ground stations secure and updated, that introduces a whole other logistical nightmare.
Oh, for sure. But that's where Apollo comes in, right?
Yeah.
Palantir's continuous software deployment system. Think about how your smartphone seamlessly updates its operating system overnight.
Yeah.
Apollo does that, but from the back of a Humvee under active signal jamming or to the hull of a submarine deep underwater.
It's wild. It uses this authorize once, use many security model. It's actually DISA authorized, which means the Defense Information Systems Agency validated its ability to manage software across classified environments simultaneously.
And this is a huge shift. Palantir's VP for Defense, Bryant Chung, he pointed out that the Titan win proves the Army is finally committed to bringing in non-traditional commercial tech companies.
Right. Rather than just relying on the legacy defense primes for everything, they're building a sovereign AI defense infrastructure now.
Yeah, like their partnership with NVIDIA to build military-grade AI compute environments using those Blackwell systems.
Exactly. So they're bundling the hardware, the software deployment, the data fusion, all into one package.
Okay, so let's take that entire conceptual framework and pivot. Because if you have engineered a system robust enough to fuse real-time satellite imagery to target a missile without overwhelming the operator.
Right.
What happens when you point that exact same technology at a corporate supply chain or a massive government bureaucracy?
Well, you realize the underlying physics of the problem are identical.
Exactly.
Whether you're tracking enemy troop movements or shipments of aerospace components, you are dealing with complex, fragmented data where rapid decision-making is just critical.
And the sources show this staggering list of civilian clients. We're talking Morgan Stanley, Airbus, Westrock Coffee, BP, Anheuser-Busch, PG&E, even Tyson Foods.
It's a massive footprint. Palantir was founded back in 2003, went public in 2020, and finally reached profitability in early 2023.
And their government revenue alone in the first quarter of 2024 hit $687 million.
Huh.
That is an 84% year-over-year growth.
Wow.
Yeah, they're sitting on roughly $8 billion in cash.
And a prime example of that government expansion is the $90 million blanket purchase agreement they secured with Health and Human Services.
Right, the HHS deal.
Yeah, it wasn't just a contract to solve a single issue for the CDC. It makes their Foundry data integration platform readily available to the FDA, the NIH, Medicare, all of it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because integrating the data is only half the battle. Once you have a unified system, how do you actually extract answers from it without needing a PhD in data science?
Right, and that brings us to AIP, the artificial intelligence platform.
Yeah, and AIP is not just a chat window. It's not just a commercial language model slapped onto a corporate database.
No, the foundational concept driving AIP is what Palantir calls an ontology.
Okay, I have to push back on that term, because ontology sounds like, well, an incredibly expensive Silicon Valley buzzword.
It totally does.
What makes it mechanically different from just a really good relational database that a company uses to track its inventory?
Okay, so a relational database just stores rows and columns of static data. right? An ontology in this ecosystem is a comprehensive digital twin of the actual physical business.
A digital twin.
Yeah, it maps out how every physical asset, every operational process, and every data feed relates to everything else in real time.
So it's interactive.
Exactly. It has bidirectional write-back capabilities, meaning actions taken in the software actually execute changes in the real world.
Oh, wow. So if I'm a logistics manager at Airbus, I'm not just asking a chatbot to summarize a spreadsheet of part numbers.
Right.
AIP lets me interact with an AI agent that understands the specific physical reality of my factory floors, my suppliers, my bottlenecks.
Yes. And that AI agent is strictly grounded in the company's specific ontology. It is completely isolated from public training data.
Which solves the hallucination problem.
Exactly. Because the system maps the physical constraints of the business, users can define strict test cases, validate the AI's responses against the ontology, and then execute autonomous workflows safely.
That's incredible. They're essentially taking the strict guardrails and human-in-the-loop controls from military targeting and applying them to corporate risk management.
Yeah, they even run 5-day intensive boot camps to onboard companies and prove these AI agents won't go rogue and break their supply chain.
But, applying military-grade data fusion to civilian environments, that introduces a pretty massive societal friction point.
It really does.
Think about your own personal data for a second. It's one thing for an AI to track a delivery truck for a logistics firm,
Sure.
but it's quite another reality when that ontology is handling your medical records.
And that brings us directly to the UK's National Health Service. In November 2023, a consortium led by Palantir won the contract for the NHS Federated Data Platform, or FDP.
Right. And the NHS is massive. It's arguably one of those fragmented healthcare systems in the world.
It is. The goal of the FDP is to connect vital health information across that entire service, moving from siloed data to a connected platform to reduce wait times.
But giving a U.S. defense contractor control of a nation's health data, that sounds like a privacy nightmare. How did Palantir actually win this?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Palantir had to prove not just technical capability, but social value and financial stability. And they had to accept incredibly strict guardrails.
Let's lay out those guardrails, because they're publicly available and they're pretty intense.
Yeah, first, it's strictly a 7-year term, and that's specifically to avoid vendor lock-in. It requires robust exit planning from day one.
Right, so if the NHS wants out, they aren't trapped.
Exactly. Second, the data sovereignty rules. The data must stay in the UK region, period.
And can't go back to U.S. servers.
Nope. And the NHS retains all intellectual property developed for NHS-funded services on the platform. Palantir doesn't get to monetize those medical innovations.
And what about security?
There's a dual layer of cyber monitoring. Palantir monitors the infrastructure, but the NHS's own cyber team is deeply integrated.
And then there's the biggest one, the step-in rights.
Right.
In extreme events, the NHS has the unilateral authority to completely take control of the service and lock out the supplier.
They can physically lock Palantir out of the data environment.
Which proves that possessing advanced tech isn't enough anymore. You have to submit to rigorous, transparent governance.
Yeah, the technology really has to be subordinate to the policy.
So if we summarize everything we've looked at today, Palantir has essentially created a dual-layered empire.
You really have.
On one side, you have the defense stack. Gotham, Maven, Titan, Apollo, making real-time, life-or-death battlefield calculations.
Fusing multi-domain intelligence.
Right. And on the other side, you have the commercial stack. Foundry, AIP, optimizing global industries and public health.
And, we are really moving into an era where decision dominance isn't just military jargon anymore.
It's everywhere.
It's how the hospitals we visit and the companies we buy from are operating behind the scenes.
It's actively rewiring the background of everyday life. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to explore on your own.
Okay.
We've examined how this ontology-driven AI can instantly fuse data to make sense of a chaotic battlefield or a corporate supply chain. But what happens when these AI agents become available on a personal level?
Oh, wow. Like a personal ontology.
Exactly. If you had a personal foundry securely parsing every single email, text message, bank statement, and health metric in your life, would having that perfect analytical clarity make you a perfect decision maker?
Or would you lose the human element of choice?
Right. By offloading the burden of processing that tangled mess of life to an algorithm, do we lose what makes our choices meaningful?
It's a huge question. Do we use these systems to master our data, or do we allow the data to master us?
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the data systems around you, and we'll catch you next time.
Hello, I'm Mike and thank you for watching. Mass thank you to this formation. Your intel in the comments and passion for construction drive this command forward every week. We're engineering an elite operation here, and I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with you on this deployment. If today's tactical breakdown hit the target, execute your orders. Smash that like button, subscribe, and pass this intel down the chain to a fellow creator or builder. This is Mike from Code and Story. Stay disciplined, keep building, and I'll see you on the next objective. Wow.